Hi everybody, this is World Cup Daily, and we hope that you'll be following me every day throughout this World Cup. And today we're going to talk about the opening game yesterday, which was between Russia and Saudi Arabia. But first of all, which I'm sure everybody was completely aware of initially, I mean, even before the tournament started, this was a very weak Russian team. Expectations were very minimal. Even one of their former players, Andrius Kanchelskis, stated emphatically that this was the worst Russian side of all time. It was all doom and gloom. Considering it was widely accepted that this was a very poor Russian team, they were in a group which was actually they were probably had a decent chance of actually progressing. I mean, it was probably the only way that they were ever going to qualify for this tournament. I mean, when you look at the Confederations Cup in 2017, they completely bombed the Confederations Cup, the rehearsal for this grand tournament. I think they completely bombed during the campaign for Euro 2016. I think there's only 7 players left from that squad. They've won only 6 games since they obviously started preparation for this World Cup. I think they've lost 5 games at home. So I mean, things just didn't bode well at all. I mean, they haven't won for 7 games, just like I think Saudi Arabia. I think it all stems from most of their problems stem from defence, where they've had problems. They've conceded goals, and one of their stalwarts, Ed Nasovic, and the 2 Bezutsky brothers, when they retired, it just left a gaping hole within their defence. And the 2 guys out of the 3 guys that have been regular over the past few years, I think 2 of them have suffered long-term injuries, and the guys that were brought in haven't been up to the mark. And that has been one of the problems. But I suppose the 3 players that they look for, who are their most important players in the present side right now, even a very average side, are Smolov, the other guy, it's Golovin and Jago, I think. Yeah, that's it. They're the 3 guys that this Russian team are completely looking to. I mean, you'd think that the 5 quota per player in each team that is enforced in the Russian league would have helped the team develop and the players, but it just hasn't worked that way at all. So we just can't see how they're gonna develop talent. For Saudi Arabia, it's the first time at this tournament since 2006, and they qualified in 2nd place behind an already qualified Japan, and they defeated them 1-0, and they headed Australia on goal difference. The team haven't won a game at the World Cup since 1994, when they beat Belgium and they beat Morocco. They've suffered several heavy defeats in their 5 World Cup appearances, notably the 8-0 destruction by Germany in 2000 and when was it? In 2002. Yeah, in 2002 in Japan, I think it was. Yeah, I think they've been through 3 coaches in the last year. I think Bert van Marwijk, that guided them through the tournament, had been coach for 2 years, but for some reason he didn't. I think the Saudi FA wanted him to live in Saudi Arabia, which he didn't. He refused to do. So they sacked him for that, and they appointed the Argentinian Lopizzi, who's been in charge since November of last year. He hasn't been given much time to really implement any kind of strategy. I mean, the players are formed from 2 of the big clubs in Saudi Arabia. I think 17 out of the 23. I think the big worry was a lack of experience in this side, and just would they be able to perform at the highest level when none of their players play abroad? I think there were 3 of their players that went out on loan to play for clubs, maybe clubs in Spain, but it didn't work out. They didn't get much playing time, so it's been very restricted. Their star man is Sherry. Yeah, I think he's 27 years old. They scored plenty of goals during the qualifiers, so people were hopeful that they could at least score goals. I mean, Saudi Arabia, I think they've been through. The coaching issue is a really big problem, because I think in the last about 13 coaches, I think in about 10 years. I mean, the one that I most remember was when the '98 World Cup, when Carlos Alberto Pereira, I think the Brazilian, I think they'd lost to France and Denmark, and he got sacked after 2 games. So that was that was a memory that was quite an unforgettable memory. Interestingly, like Pizzi had already been a coach throughout the campaign, where he managed Chile. He almost guided Chile to the World Cup, but the final day defeat in Brazil by 3 goals, I think 3-0, ended their hopes. But going to the match, that was a bit of background, like leading up to the games. But the match, basically, it was played, in Moscow's Olympic Stadium. It's going to be used for the final, and you had 2 sides, the lowest ranked sides at the World Cup at 67 and 70. They definitely wouldn't have been expected to bat for the final. And apart from being the 2 biggest, the largest crude oil nations, there was nothing that that you could expect. Putin became the first head of state to basically give a speech at the beginning of before the commencement of festivities. That's the first, and that's Putin. So he was never going to be outdone. But in terms of the game, it was surprisingly a very open game at the start. Match, unexpectedly. Saudi had about 60% of the possession. They were slick, and they could move and pass the ball. But what they did, it left them open, and they were leaving themselves exposed, and they were just allowed the Russians, who were very like the counter-attacking Russians, who were very aggressive. They got their tackles in, like fairly compact, and it allowed them to exploit all the frailties that the Saudis had within their defence, and soon they totally overran them. And they scored after about 13 minutes, and then the second half was killed. And there was a slight hiccup when their star player Smolov suffered a hamstring injury, and he was taken off. But one of the guys, Chersev and Zuba, who came on, they totally transformed the game, and Chersev scored probably one of the goals, what will be one of the goals of the tournament. And it was just, it was just, they just rolled over like Saudi Arabia. There was nothing that they just, after 2 games, you could officially even say that they were almost out of the tournament, as much as, because they were that bad. Russia, the mood in the stadium was completely different to when the fans that when they'd entered the stadium. They were given hope. They were a bit nervous about how they'd perform and whether they were going to be the first side ever to lose the opening game. It didn't happen, and so there was a flood of goals, and which could prove significant in the final readings. And so they really exceeded expectations, and it's going to be quite fascinating. It was glad that the hosts. It was good to see that the hosts really got off to a good start, and as long as the hosts do well, it will ignite the fire and keep people interested for the rest of the tournament. It bodes well for everything else. And yeah, so we look forward to talking about the following games. I think there are Egypt against Uruguay, Morocco, Iran, and then the big one, Spain against Portugal. So we'll talk later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.